Good evening, everyone. My name is Alexis Kleiman, and I'm the Vice Chair of NEXTNiagara. It's my pleasure to welcome you to RealTalk, Building Community Through Honest Conversation. This series is presented by NEXTNiagara and the Niagara Region Anti-Racism Association. In this session, we'll begin real, honest, sometimes uncomfortable, important conversations. We will begin to discuss how we can all do our part to eliminate inequality and implement more fair and democratic policies in our lives and workplaces. We know that this is a large topic and a lot can be unpacked and discussed here. So we hope this is just the beginning of many conversations on the topic. NEXTNiagara is a young professional council under the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce. We're committed to representing and amplifying the voice of the next generation in Niagara by creating opportunities for community engagement and empowerment. One of the ways that we do that is through events just like this. On behalf of the council, I invite you to engage with us on social media, and also, if our mission interests you, to apply for our council as we're beginning a round of recruitment in early 2021. It's with gratitude that we're able to offer this series through a partnership with our co-host, the Niagara Region Anti-Racism Association, or NARA. The Niagara Region Anti-Racism Association is determined to tackle the issue of racism in the Niagara region and beyond, in order to participate in the creation of a just and equal society. The Niagara Region Anti-Racism Association was founded in the summer of 2018 by a Black woman and two BIPOC trans folks who experienced anti-Black racism in a previous local anti-racism organization. Their current campaign includes police reforms in the Niagara Regional Police Services, employment equity, school reforms in the District School Board of Niagara. For more information to find out how you can get involved, please visit them on social media or their website, www.nrara.org. We would like to thank the YMCA of Niagara for making this event possible through their sponsorship. And I'd like to turn it over to Deanna Diella, Director of Employment and Immigrant Services, to say a few words.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. For those that are familiar with the YMCA in Niagara, you will know that we are all about building capacity within our community. But lately, COVID has really personally made me stop and rethink about what it means to build capacity. And it's really made me take a step back and talk about not so much capacity, but really talk about building stronger communities together. I don't think you can build capacity if you're not together. And so I am pleased that this conversation today is about building community through honest, and I love the uncomfortable. If anybody who knows me, I love the uncomfortable. So let the uncomfortable conversation begin. Sticking around, I'd like to take some notes. Want to hear what the folks are saying, because as an organization in Niagara, it is really important that we get it right as an organization who serves and is open to everybody who wishes to access services. So let the conversation begin and enjoy your evening.
Thank you, Deanna. So with that said, I am very excited to introduce our two dynamic speakers for the evening. So Julie Christiansen brings 30 years of experience as a mental health worker, public speaker, and educator to audiences worldwide. A registered psychotherapist in a thriving private practice located here in Niagara, Julie specializes in anger, trauma recovery, forensic psychology, relationships, and bullying. Julie's strengths as a therapist contribute to her success as a speaker, as she adapts as while reading her audience and tailoring her message to that so it is easy to hear and receive. She has presented it to audiences in France, the UK, the Caribbean, and across the United States and Canada. And she is known for tackling difficult topics with tact, grace, and humor. Julie developed the Anger Solutions program in 1994 and translated this exceptional program into a self-help book in 2003. She has published several self-help books on stress, bullying, coping with crisis, and moving past one's past. Julie is a sought-after media expert on topics relating to anger, stress, and forensic psychology. She has appeared on national radio and television outlets in North America and various print media. She is currently under contract as a consultant for a scripted television drama series in development. Julie's professional and personal mission is to leverage people into radical, positive, lasting change. And a great introduction to you. Thank you and welcome, Julie. And Crystal DeCuna is a respected leader in the customer experience industry for her unique approach to employee experience and customer experience design. As the Inside View's Chief Experience Officer, Crystal is an award-winning CX professional, an international keynote speaker, an entrepreneur, and a proud football mom. Crystal has worked her way up from an entry-level position to earn her seat at the C-suite table. She is a certified leadership coach, a certified professional speaker, and has a designation that less than 12% of professional speakers have. She engineers experiences around the globe by igniting leaders, exciting employees, and delighting customers. As an award-winning entrepreneur, accomplished senior executive, a customer experience professional with a background in sales and leadership, her career spans over 20 years of success in several industries, including retail, construction, not-for-profit, and hospitality. Crystal attended York University and Brock University and is now part of John Maxwell's leadership team. She has been trained by Tony Robbins and the Ritz-Carlton and is a Disney Institute graduate. Crystal contributes to her industry and her community by serving on several boards, including Grow Your Biz, Entwine, and Customer Experience Week Canada. She is a continued supporter of the YWCA of Niagara, also an organization near and dear to my heart, and youth football. Crystal has received numerous awards in sales, CX, and leadership, and including an award awarded as a 40 under 40 business achievement leader, and most recently a Women in Business Award recipient presented by the GNCC. Crystal has led sales teams to achieve Avid Rating Awards for CX, and her team was recognized as being among the top 10% of builders focused on CX nationwide. Her strong background in learning, development, and managing large corporations makes her a coveted monitor for companies crave. Organizations hire Crystal because of her commitment to customer experience excellence. She leads and implements the 7 foundational steps of CX mastery. Organizations see an increase in employee engagement, customer satisfaction, employee customer retention, productivity, and profitability while implementing her methodology. Crystal has a boots on the ground, roll up your sleeves approach to CX and EX, and includes cultural design and diversity practices that are foundational to any successful, thriving business that wants to succeed in the 21st century. Crystal is an Indo-Canadian and a bit of a Bollywood fan. She tends to bring that side of herself out by dancing Bhangra now and then, but is also rooted in good old Canadian culture, she says, except that she picks Starbucks over Tim Hortons. She is witty and cheeky, and that approach to CX design is what organizations love about her. She also considers herself an unofficial selfie queen and is a really loud football mom. So what a great introduction to you, Crystal. Thank you and welcome. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in now that we have been introduced to our 2 dynamic speakers here. And so everyone knows the questions that we're going to be going through here today are generated by attendees. You will also have the opportunity to go ahead and type any questions that you have in the chat, and we'll refer back to those during an open Q&A. So go ahead and write those questions in early on as you think of them amongst our discussion, and we'll prompt you to do so again later on. So as I noted, this is really an introduction to this topic. So we're mindful that there is so much more that can be said from what we're starting here. But the first question we are going to open with is, what does it mean to be anti-racist in the workplace?
All right, so I guess I'll start. Thank you so much for that introduction. It was a little longer than I thought when we were putting it together, but thank you so much. NEXTNiagara, GNCC, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to really connect with your audience, and so I so appreciate it. What a great platform to talk about what we're really diving into. And so, you know, when you say, what does it mean to be anti-racist? I think the big difference here is that, you know, racism is showing its ugly head all over the place right now, and it's a really scary time to be. You know, I'm a mom, and it's just a very, very scary time. And so when I look at being anti-racist, it's about being active in the fight against racism, right? And so if we're just talking about being non-racist, okay, so that is, okay, I'm not racist. I don't have a, I don't hold a grudge against people of color or, people, LGBT people, or, really having that kind of, I don't hold a grudge mentality. But if we're anti-racist, that means we have to have responsibility to take action and to really be able to do something against racism. So taking a real loud, boisterous, approach, doesn't have to be an aggressive approach, but you have to be active. I think that's really what being anti-racist is, no longer can we just accept that allyship of, what, you're of color and you're my friend, that means I'm not racist. It just doesn't work anymore. And we noticed that a lot during, I'm sure my friend Julie will agree, we noticed that a lot during, the protests and when these challenging things were happening. I would be literally sitting in conversations and people saying to me, you know what, Crystal, I've known you for 20 years. I'm not racist. And you might not be racist against me because you've known me for 20 years, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're anti-racist. You're not taking an active approach. It was very shocking to see how many people were very silent, people that, had an opportunity to have a voice on social media. In the business community, it was a little disappointing, to be honest, in our business community, how many people were just so silent. And that's what it means to be anti-racist, is to really have a voice on which side of this you're falling on. I hope I answered that question right.
Yeah, if I can just double up on that, I definitely agree with everything that Crystal has said. I think too, when we talk about being anti-racist, it's not just about taking that stand, sort of on a broader, more public level, even whether it's through your social media or whatever, but it's in your everyday interactions. You have the choice to be racist, to be non-racist, or to be anti-racist.
Mm-hmm.
And so in everything that you're doing, if you're in a store or in a coffee shop and you see someone being mistreated, and there doesn't seem to be a reason why they're being mistreated, except for that they're a person of color, that's a moment for you to be anti-racist, to step up and say, hey, you know what, you wouldn't treat any other customer like this. This isn't okay. Perhaps that opportunity is in just having a conversation with a person of color, getting to know somebody who's not like you, and finding out what are those 6 degrees of separation. Being anti-racist in the workplace means that when someone comes in who doesn't look like you, who doesn't dress like you, who doesn't talk like you, that you don't treat them any differently than you would treat your regular customer. That when people who are applying for jobs come in and they speak with an accent, that you don't assume that they think with an accent.
Love
right?
that.
It's anti-racism is all of those things. It's not just in your actions, it's an attitude shift that has to take place so that you no longer see people of color or people who identify differently or people with disabilities or people who are First Nations. You don't see them as other. You see them as you, right? You treat them the way that you would expect people to treat you. And that really is the crux of eliminating the notion of racism from our culture, is when we don't say things like, I don't see color, because if you don't see color, then you don't see the disparity and the inequality, but rather that you see color, but it doesn't matter. The person is more important than the color of their skin.
You appreciate the color, right? You appreciate the color that's bringing a diverse perspective to the table.
Yes.
And if I can add one more thing to that, Alexis, is just, in our business community, Julie hit everything kind of right on the head, taking that same approach in our Niagara business community. I think it's often about us recognizing that it doesn't have to be angry. So for example, in our business community, if you are a colleague or coworker, and maybe you're not witnessing, an angry racism happening, a fight or a challenge, but you're noticing that, one particular person celebrates a holiday and they don't get any really recognition for that particular holiday because it's not the typical holidays that we celebrate. Or you notice that, they might like a certain type of food, and when they heat up that food in the microwave, it smells a certain way, and all of a sudden they've got a label on them. And you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Go ahead and tell me in the chat if you know what I'm talking about, because I know it happens. And, as Niagara, as a culture, I'm such an advocate for our business community, but those little things, really start to, they hurt. They really hurt, because we are, there's so few people of color in our community that that when we are trying to be able to really dive into businesses, being anti-racist is so, it means not, giving into that conversation around how somebody's lunch smells, or how, they might wear an ethnic clothing to work, or not giving into that conversation. Instead, having a proactive voice in that, hey guys, let's respect this. Maybe they can make some food for us, right? Like just having that level of respect to be able to appreciate people's diversity, right? I just think that's so important here.
I really love how you also incorporated specific examples that you both see in the community, and things, that people can integrate directly right into the workplace. Things that already, as you said, tell me in the chat if you see this. I'm sure there were people nodding their heads as you two were both speaking about things that they have experienced or witnessed situationally, and maybe how they can start to rework and react and take action. And have that attitude shift, as you were mentioning, Julie. So a follow-up to that, because it was mentioned by both of you, and it was one of the questions that came up from attendees, is how does intersectionality come into play here? So when we're talking about invisible minorities, but now bringing in, what does that look like for women in the workplace, for those who may identify with the LGBTQ plus community? Is there that extra layer of attentiveness, or how would you expand those first answers into that area?
Well, if I could take a stab at that one, I think, again, in my mind, when I think about the way that human beings, and I know that it's a natural process of our brains to categorize things, right? We categorize everything: big, small, short, tall, all the red things, all the orange things, all the black things, right? All the electronic things. This is how our brains function. So I want to keep that in mind, that, I'm not suggesting that the fact that we tend to group people together, like with like, is necessarily a bad thing. I think when it becomes a challenge is when we associate values to those groupings, right? And so if we look at a particular group, whatever that group might be, it might be people of color, or maybe people who identify with the LGBTQ plus, women, people with disabilities, whatever it may be, when we start thinking, oh, I have to do something different for that group, that's when we need to check ourselves, right? I have twins, and when they were babies, I remember how difficult it was to try and get the stroller into certain places. We didn't have those really cool compact twin strollers like you have now. 26 years ago, they were limousines. And so you try to push a limo up on the curb with two 40-pound babies in it. That's hard. And I remember back then thinking, how do people in wheelchairs get around?
Yeah.
Right? I can't get these two kids, up the curb. I can't get them into this building to see the doctor without somebody helping me cart this stroller up the stairs. How do people with disabilities navigate these barriers? And the fact that we still in 2020 are struggling to make buildings accessible. And it's not that we're making them accessible for people with disabilities, we're just making them accessible. Right? And this is where the mind shift comes, when instead of saying we're going to do affirmative action so that we have a few token people of color in the workplace, why not just hire people based on their qualifications, right? Instead of assuming that because their skin is a certain color or a certain shade, or that they identify differently, or that they use a cane or a wheelchair or a hearing aid or a seeing eye dog or whatever it might be, that we have to adapt specially for them because they're the different ones. How about we just treat everyone equally? One of the things that I say often, and forgive me if I'm ranting, but one of the things that I say often is that I think that the Black Lives Matter movement is really about equality and fairness, right? We want to be seen as equal, not other, but we also want to be treated with fairness, the way that everyone else in what's considered the majority is treated, with the same measure of respect, with the same measure of expectation, with given the same opportunities to display our excellence, right? All of those things are important. So it's not just about let's do something special in the workplace so that this group feels accommodated. No, this group is not separate from you. It's a different category of human, but we're still humans. So how about we just, expand that experience so that every human who comes into the sphere of whatever your business is feels like they belong there.
Yeah, it's a human approach. It's Julie, you hit it on the head, I think, really, really well. Alexis, would you mind repeating the question? I was so engaged in what Julie was saying, I totally forgot the question.
Yes, yes. I know, I was wrapped up in that as well. But how would intersectionality come in when we're talking about racism?
Got it. So, and I talk about this, so I teach a course actually on diversity and inclusion, and I talk about this a lot because, the word diversity, I think in the last little while in particular, it's kind of roared its ugly head around simply race. And it's so not that, right? The word diversity and inclusion is about really accepting those with disabilities, abilities, and, all genders, all nationalities. It's all religions, all political views, right? It's about being diverse. And listen, 87% of businesses that have a diverse background are 87% better to make decisions. So what I mean by that is that decision making within your business in terms of like strategic planning or new products or new services, you're better positioned to make these business decisions if you have a diverse workforce, from disabilities to abilities to just everybody. Because the beauty of humanity is that we're all going to look at things a little bit different, right? We're all going to be coming at it from a different perspective. For example, like I'm East Indian, and so we have a lot of cultural background things that we look at when I'm approaching a business or somebody, a product to purchase or a service to purchase. There's a bit of a culture shift in my decision making that I might not even realize, but it's almost an unconscious bias that I have as a consumer. And so I think it's important for businesses to see that, like, you as a business are actually better equipped and better positioned to be a leader in business if your workforce is diverse, and also if your customer segments are diverse, because you're then able to learn a little bit more about what's important to those people. And to Julie's point, you're not creating just for one segment of people, you're creating for humanity. Now, maybe some products or services are certainly specific, right? So some products or services are specific to people with disabilities or specific to women. There's definitely those products or services out there. But what I'm saying is we want to be able to really be aware of, and I see this often in women's retail. I see this so often. If anybody's on Instagram, I'm a bit of an Instagram junkie. And, when we go on Instagram and we see some great fashion or really great stuff or great shoes or handbags or whatever we see, and we're scrolling, and then I go and look at the feed. And as much as I love what I'm seeing, everybody is Caucasian in that feed, or, everybody is skinny and right. And so there's this perception that we're just so pigeonholing ourselves. And so that brand is only going to sell to those people. They're not selling to me, and they're probably not selling to Julie, and they're not selling to, the wider majority of people that are out there. And now with the way, COVID has positioned us all to be global brands, we're not all just selling in Niagara now. We've we've now become more positioned to sell globally or sell into a larger scale. And so because of that, I think it's so much more important that we're aware of kind of that intersectionality, that who we're really targeting, and then also having those different diverse perspectives around your business table to make those decisions and to see them from that perspective. The other thing I want to add here is it's okay if you don't have that now. Like, these conversations are what's going to help us. And so, you know, I've grown up in Niagara, and there's so many amazing businesses here that you don't have people of color at the table. And I think that's okay. But I think what we want to do is you want to ask people of color that might be not even people of color, people of disabilities, abilities, a diverse perspective, to help you be better at this decision-making process, to help you, understand how you can increase sales, how you can increase your market segment, how you can really kind of just be better for humanity. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, that's fantastic. And that actually started to discuss one of my follow-up questions exactly to that is, for companies that may be thinking, that's not currently what my landscape looks like. How can I do better in that space? How can I better, engage diverse perspectives in my everyday activities around marketing, around events, around whatever services I'm delivering? What would you suggest would be that next step? Would it be really looking to your network and engaging those voices?
Yes. However, so number one, just ask. I've been in sales my whole life. Like, let's stop being afraid to ask. Just ask, right? Ask people that might be able to help. So be vulnerable and have the confidence to just ask. But also, don't just ask to ask, right? So you want to be able to make sure that you're actioning and you're ready as a leadership team, as an organization. If you're going to ask, then you want to be ready to take some action. I think that's really important. As I launched this program, this diversity inclusion program, there was a lot of businesses that were super excited about it, ready to go. And then, there was a lot of businesses that were interested in it, but weren't ready to take action. And so I didn't take action with them, right? Because it's like, you have to be ready to actually do something with this information, because we really want to make sure that we're not just doing it to kind of check off that box, right? That we're doing it because we realize that in this crazy pandemic that we're all in, that if we are able to open up our minds and be more diverse and be more inclusive, then there's a high probability that you're going to end 2021 with anywhere from a 10 to 15% increase in your sales, right? And so because you've opened up new minds, you've now become more appealing to more people. And so I'm really taking that business approach to it. But I think for me, that's what is missing in our Niagara community. That's just what I've been seeing for years. And I've been pretty vocal about it, but I think it's even more important that we kind of continue that conversation.
I just want to share a statistic here that I found today when I was looking around, just looking at what kind of dollar value or what kind of buying power minority markets have. And one statistic I found said that minority markets represent between $2 and $3.9 trillion.
With a T.
Trillion. So when you think about that, if your business is either consciously or unconsciously excluding minority markets, think of the revenues that you're missing out on because you offer a service or a product in a way that doesn't resonate with people of color. And that is something that's just, when I think about the buying power of women, excuse me, or the buying power of LGBTQ+. Any vacation destination that caters to the LGBTQ+ community is rocking, because, and again, hotels that have suites that are fully accessible and don't, rent them out to fully abled people, but actually leave them available for people who have disabilities. Venues, like there are many venues in Niagara Falls that have done renovations and made their businesses fully accessible. I believe the Niagara Incline Rail now is fully accessible. When you do things like that, it draws customers to you because they see that you think they're important enough to make your service, your product accessible for all, right? And that's the really key thing, is to make it accessible for all, whether it's people of color, whether it's people with disabilities, whatever. When you have a really inclusive approach to how you market, to how you sell, to how you lay out your store, to, you know, making sure that wherever the parking for people who have disabilities is laid out, that the ramp is actually close to where the parking is, right? So they don't have to try and navigate a parking lot that's dangerous in a wheelchair or with a walker or a cane. And the other thing that I would mention too is that, you know, when we talk about intersectionality, people with invisible disabilities, I can't tell you how many times I have seen people who I suppose mean well, but they don't know enough and they don't care to ask. They see someone with the, you know, with the thing in their car, and they see that person walking into the mall or walking into a building, and they go off on them as though they're somehow, you know, defrauding the system because they're not in a wheelchair. Well, not every disability is a visible one. And so, you know, one of the things I hear a lot from my clients is they say, well, I have chronic pain. I have constant migraines. I hear a swarm of bees in my head every day, and it's impossible to pay attention to things because I'm constantly distracted by the tinnitus. And then people come up to me and they say, well, you look fine. And it just devalues their experience and minimizes it to the place where they don't feel like it's even worth to go anywhere, because people will not understand that they have a disability because it's invisible. So it's all of these things. I think we really, as a community, need to do a better job of not being hypersensitive, but just being empathetic and compassionate enough and observant enough to notice when there are processes or barriers that are in place that prevent people from accessing the services that you have to offer. I'm shutting up now.
No, that was so good.
No. Is fantastic. I really appreciate, I saw some comments in the chat saying like, this is a great conversation. I really appreciate the depth in your responses here. So I have a follow-up question to that. And that is for those who may be in non-leadership positions or non-decision-making positions. You know, you're working for an organization and you see these issues taking place. How do you suggest that they make the next step or encourage their management to then, you know, get ready to be able to take action? Yeah, Krista, it looks like you want to.
Yeah, I'm like excited about this one. You know what? I think it's important, and I think just again, the scape of Niagara, right? The landscape of our region. I think it's really important to show them the business value of it, right? So when you're able to attach some numbers to really show that, listen, 70% of diverse organizations are better positioned to capture new markets, right? And to grow their businesses. When you're able to show some real tangible numbers, there's not a business in Niagara I know right now that's not ready, willing, and able to grow, right? And to be able to be sustainable in the market right now. So I think it's really important to be able to bring the numbers to it, right? If we're going to talk all numbers, then we want to make sure that we're bringing those numbers to it. I would also say that I think, you know, you don't have to have a leadership title to be a leader, right? And we've talked about this. Julie and I have had this conversation many times, but you know, I think it's about just starting to take action. Perhaps if you're that person in an organization that's ready and willing to respect somebody of a different ability, or you know, from a diverse background, then just start. Right? Just start doing it. Take some action and be that anti-racist that is able to kind of start and taking some action. So whether it's, you know, just getting involved, whether it's celebrating the volley with somebody, right? So I was telling Julie earlier today that, you know, the volley this year is, it was just passed a couple of weeks ago, and I must have gotten, my phone blew up with the volley messages. Happy the volley, happy the volley. And I graciously said, thank you so much. You know, I appreciate it. But here's where our conscious and unconscious biases come in. East Indian, but I'm also Roman Catholic. And so I don't celebrate Diwali technically, right? Because Diwali is actually a religious holiday. And so in all these years, very few people have actually texted me during Diwali, but people did. And so I respectfully appreciate it. And I, showed it on social media, gave a little bit of education on it. And so great that people are making that effort to celebrate with me. And I certainly celebrate with our people. However, I think it's really interesting because it's this unconscious bias that people have that, well, because she's Indian, she probably celebrates Diwali, right? And so I think these are the things that we need to be able to kind of recognize that we've had these unconscious biases so deeply ingrained in our mindset that it's hard. It's going to be hard. It's going to take literally a conscious, intentional effort to kind of shift and change. And it also happens, I talk about this all the time in customer experience design, is we have to design things to delight, right? We have to be able to design things to be able to include people, which means we have to take time to do it, right? You wouldn't design a marketing strategy and just say, well, there's our marketing strategy and it's done. You have to put time into a marketing strategy or a sales strategy or anything that you're doing for your business. And the same goes with diversity and inclusion. It's one thing to be asked to the dance or invited to the dance, but it's an entirely different thing to be asked to dance, right? If people can invite us, but we have to be able to be willing to be asked to dance and be involved in that solution process. I think that's kind of one of those missing pieces.
I think it's important to just, there is a culture that is prevalent today and in over the last few years of trying to shame people into change. And I for one don't feel like that's the way to go. I mean, if the only reason that I'm changing is because somebody shamed me publicly on social media, how sincere is the intention behind the change, right? Is it more about preserving my image than it is actually doing the right thing? And so, when the question is, when I see these things happening in my workplace, how do I address it? I think the best way is to go to the source, go to the person that you see using the language, engaging in the behavior, whatever it is, and just pull them aside and have a compassionate, open, honest conversation about why that's not okay, right? And start there.
And you're not going to change everyone, right? You're not going to change everybody, and that's okay. Like, I think, sorry to interrupt you, Julie, but I think that's such a big thing, is we can't change people.
It's true. And as you were asking the question, Alexis, I remembered back to when I was working in a community college, and I won't say which one, but I was they had like a convenience store where you could get, tokens for the transit and, get your ice cream or your chocolate bars or your Jamaican patties before you headed out to go home. And I made a habit of stopping in there pretty much after every day before I headed out to catch the transit to come back home. And it was a member of the faculty, and I didn't know him. He wandered into the store, and he was a tall, blue-eyed, white-haired white man, and the shop owner was of East Indian descent. And so he walked into the store and started talking to the shop owner with an Indian accent. And it was a train wreck. I see you, Crystal. It got worse and worse and worse. And I stood there and I was horrified. And I remember thinking to myself, if I were tall enough, I would punch that guy in the face, but he was like a foot taller than me. But I wanted to do something, and so I thought, okay, like, I don't even know where HR is. I work here part-time. I don't know what I'm doing. And afterwards, when it was my turn, the man finally left, thank God. When he finally left, and I went up to the shop owner and I just looked at him and I said, I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to say. I didn't feel like I was in a position that I could confront the man who was being so obnoxious, but to go to the shop owner and say, not you know that not everybody is like him. But since he's too ignorant to apologize for his behavior, I'm going to apologize on his behalf. And I could see that, the shoulders finally came down. It was like he was just bracing himself for the interaction. And I got the sense that that happened a lot. And those things do happen a lot. And it's the little microaggressions, like, can I touch your hair? No, you may not touch my hair. Or, say something Jamaicanish. No, I don't want to say something Jamaicanish because this is how you know what I'm saying? Like, this is how I talk. I'm not going to perform my culture just to make you happy. I am who I am. And yes, I was born in Jamaica, and people will say things like, oh, you are so articulate and you don't have an accent. That's actually a microaggression, right? The assumption that because I don't have an accent, that it makes me somehow a better level of Black person,
Mm-hmm.
a smarter level of Black person, instead of just appreciating that, people of different ethnicities are also intelligent and have much to offer and actually contribute, as Crystal and I have both said already, trillions of dollars into our gross domestic product. So why is there still this assumption that that you are not equal, or that we are not equal, and that somehow any concessions that are made for us are because we can't get there on our own? I'm ranting again, I apologize. But do you know what I'm saying? Like, I think when we're in the workplace and we see those things happen, you can't always confront. If you can, then you should. But you can't always. But what you can do is you can be an ally as well, and to show that you have kinship with the other person, regardless of your ethnicity, your background, your status in the workplace, whatever. You can still be an ally in those ways.
Can I add one point to that? I'm sorry, it's a long answer to your question, Alexis. But I want to answer, Julie just made me think of a quick story that I think would really help our audience, or just kind of understand. There was a local business here in Niagara, established 25 years, probably, maybe even longer, actually probably more than 30 years. And I was working with them on a project, and we were trying to find great people for them. And and we found some really great people that could certainly do the job. And I remember presenting them with a resume, and of course, right away, the name on the resume. I remember the response of the business owner, who I respected highly until this, and then until that comment. And she said to me, she goes, well, Crystal, I want to make sure that I have somebody that speaks English. And I said, well, they can type English. They wrote the resume, right? Like they can. And she goes, yeah, but I want to make sure that they can speak English. So right away, that bias was there, whether I was going to break it down or not. And I probably went back at it 2 or 3 times. I said, they seem like a great candidate. And on the phone, they were quite lovely. I think they'll be a really great fit. And so I twisted her arm almost to let her have this interview with them. And so they had an interview with them, and he had a really a thick accent, it was an African accent. So he had a really thick accent, but he was really great to be able to speak. He spoke English very, very fine, because he did on the phone. So I knew he'd be fine. And right when he was highly, highly qualified for that position, like perfect fit. And right when he left, and she said to me, I said, okay, so what do you think? She goes, well, who else do we have? I said, well, we've already gone through a couple of people. I said, my choice would be him. What are your thoughts? And she goes, well, I want to make sure that, he can speak English good. And I think it'd be really hard to understand him. And I don't think that the rest of the team would really be able to understand him. And, as much as I went back and forth in this battle, I wasn't going to win. It wasn't my responsibility to win, right? And it was kind of, I had to take the step back. And he spoke English, but he spoke English with an accent. My friends from Europe speak English with an accent. Why is it any different, right? Why is it any different for a British person than it is for anybody else? And so that was really, it was kind of an eye opener that I'm not going to change this environment. The other part of it, though, is that that gentleman probably sees that kind of bias. I don't even know if he's still facing that kind of bias or challenge, right? And so I think it's important for us to be able to, why are people changing their names for resumes so that they'll get a phone call, right? I've had situations where I've put my name on things and then I show up and they don't expect a woman of color, right? They don't expect that at all because I'm, you know, it happens all the time, and we see it so often here in Niagara. And here, I'm here to say, like, in India, English is actually our first language. Go figure, right? And so people are always like, well, they, you know, they might not speak English. Well, guys, it's just an accent. Just because they have an accent doesn't mean we don't speak English, right? And so there's just these little unconscious biases that we have to really make a conscious effort. And it starts with leadership, right? It starts with our leaders doing it and our leaders correcting it. And, you know, that's why our philosophy is ignite leaders, excite employees, delight customers. We need to be able to ignite our leaders to start looking at things a little bit differently. Because when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at start to change, right? And so I think it's such an important point. Sorry, I talked too much.
No, this is fantastic. And I think really the complementary conversation between the two of you is so enriching that in and of itself, I can even see in some of the comments, I completely echo what Deanna is saying, that it hurts my heart when you're saying those things, but it's so evident that change is needed within those spaces at multiple levels. Yeah. And I want to bring it back before we do refer back to the attendee questions, because I think it is really important to talk about allyship and what that looks like. So you have mentioned some situations in which you see racism, and how do you confront that? You know, whether that's going the HR route, whether that is confronting the person or elsewhere. But outside of that, what does allyship look like within the workspace? And what can attendees here take away that action piece, that call to action with them?
I think allyship. Oh, sorry, Crystal.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I think allyship, it really depends on the context that you find yourself in. It's not going to look the same everywhere. You know, I've gone into places where I have seen people almost be militant in their attempts to be allies, and it's off-putting. And it actually, I think, in a lot of ways does more damage than good, because when you come across as superior and smug because look at me, you know, I'm supporting this group and you're not, it goes back to that shaming mentality. And when you push, people will push back. And I personally, and I don't have any data to back this up, okay? I'm just saying, I personally believe that the best way to win people and to support people is to connect with them, to come alongside of them and have meaningful conversations, right? Not just about race. I mean, if everybody who wanted to have a meaningful conversation with me wanted to talk about my skin color, I would pull my hair out. I would lose my mind. Talk to me about other things. Like, let's connect. I'm in a community on Instagram and on Facebook that is a community of authors. And we very rarely talk about issues of race or ethnicity, but we talk about books. And I've connected with some amazing people that I would never have had an opportunity to meet if we didn't connect on the basis of our love for books. You see what I'm saying? So, you know, if all people want to talk to me about is my skin color, I guarantee you that conversation is going to degrade, and it's going to degrade quickly. The last such conversation I had ended with me, you know, and they call me the anger lady because I'm so chill all the time. And I wanted to peel the top layers of dermis off of this woman's face. She had so wound the things that she was saying that were just, I don't know, like, I don't even know if it was innocent or if it was intentional, but just so incredibly offensive under the guise of wanting to know more, right? And so sometimes the intent behind the questions, behind the conversation is not always, it's not always to learn. Sometimes it's to harm. right? And so I think it's important that if you want to come alongside people, that you first have to check yourself, check your intentions. What are, one of the things I'm always asking when I talk about anger solutions is, what's your desired outcome? What are you hoping to get out of this conversation? So if I'll just pick a culture. I love Japanese culture. I just love the way that they interact with each other, and just some of the customs that follow Japanese culture and Japanese business. Now, if I'm going to go and start asking someone questions so that I can learn more, it would make sense for me to state my intentions early in that conversation, to say, I'm not asking these questions to be ignorant. I'm not asking them to make you uncomfortable. I really just am enamored with the culture and I want to know more about it. Will you share with me what you know? That's different than just going, why'd y'all wear kimonos? You know what I'm saying? Like, just throwing out questions. Do you know any samurais? I mean, no. Right. So I think understanding what your end game is, what's your objective? Is your objective actually to know and understand and have a better sense of the cultural differences, but also the richness of the culture and the richness of the human being in front of you and how that contributes to your business? If that's your intention, go for it. If your intention is just to be sort of, what everybody's calling a token ally, which is like, oh, tell me about, what life was like in Jamaica. Well, I don't really remember because I was 6 when I left, so can't help you there. You know what I mean? And asking me questions if I like to eat certain kinds of food, because, again, it's just like, it's more like you're asking, can you reinforce the stereotypes with which I'm familiar, so that I can say that I actually know about your culture? That's really what the underlying messaging is, or at least that's how it's received. So again, I think check your intentions and be upfront about what you're hoping to gain from the interaction with whoever it is that you're talking to. When people approach me like that, I am happy to sit down and have a conversation and answer questions, because I'm encouraged that whatever information I share will increase the other person's awareness and empathy of the issues that surround this topic, right? But if it's just oh, well, I'm just going to sort of ask the first 3 questions that pop into my head and they're all reinforcing the biases I already have, I'm not interested in having that conversation.
Julie, just great points. I was writing notes as you were talking. It was such a good, you just hit on so many things. And, to add to allyship, I would really start to take a look at, and I want to get away from the topic of just the color of our skin, like Julie was saying, right? How many years ago did we hear it's more than the content of it's the content of our character, not just the color of our skin. I mean, that was years ago, and we're still having these conversations, which is fantastic, but also, not so hot, right? We wish we were further ahead at this point. But to your point, it's not, again, just about the color of our skin, but like these people of, abilities and disabilities, or different religions, or, different nationalities, different sexualities. I think it's really important to understand, like somebody of a LGBTQ community, they need an ally. Right. And so somebody from a disabilities community, they need an ally. And so I think it's important that we can all be allies for everybody else, because we are only our own person. I should be an ally for people with disabilities. I should be an ally for people of the LGBTQ community. So we all have a responsibility to kind of be allies in some token. I think it's important to kind of understand that. And we have an ally we have a responsibility to be allies to humanity, right? When it comes to race, in particular, race and religion, coming from, within Canada, within Niagara in particular, we have such a phenomenally diverse community. We actually do here in Niagara Falls in particular. Like in the last 5 or 6 years, it's tremendously become diverse, which is exciting. But at the same token, I don't know that allyship is I don't know that people are fearful. I think people are fearful of being allies, because when you start to speak up and when you start to have the conversation, you'll lose a couple friends. Like, you will lose those people. I've lost business, hundreds of thousands of dollars of business because of when I speak up, right? And so I think it's really important that we want to be able to kind of understand what that looks like from a bigger scope and not be fearful of that. So, our allies have a responsibility, because you're in a position of power. If you're a white female or a white male in Niagara, whether you think so or not, you have a position of power to be able to help others. But we all have a responsibility to be able to speak up. So I think it's not just the pressure's not just on one type of person, but it really is. They certainly have that upper hand, whether they wanted it or not. They have it, right?
Thank you. And I know to the attendees that we were going to open it up for some Q&A before wrapping up, but this has just been such meaningful conversation taking place. And so I didn't want to cut that off there. We do have one question to get to in the chat before we wrap things up. And that is from Ryan, who says, I have seen people react negatively and defensively when these topics are brought up. I think many of us have. They seem to think that involving them in the discussion may be a personal attack for some reason, maybe actually calling them a racist or calling them sexist. So do you have any tips before we wrap up on how to respond to someone that may be acting defensive when you're initiating this conversation? And maybe Crystal, if you would like to kick things off, and then
Sure. I think, even on conversations like today, we need Niagara's business community to get more involved in this, right? If we really want to make change, we need our leaders in our business communities. They're on meetings all day long. These are the types of conversations they need to be a part of. And so I think it's really a matter of being invited to the dance, right? So are we inviting them to the dance, or are we inviting them to dance? I've said this, but we just got to flip it around the other way. Is, those leaders in our community, those CEOs, those executives, those presidents, those people that have the power to make some change in the culture of our business community. Are we inviting them specifically? Are we taking the same amount of time that we would for perhaps a sponsorship, or perhaps, right? If there's something in it for us, we're going to pick up the phone and make those calls. And so we want to be able to take that action. And so, Ryan, the other point is that we have to be able to show them, again, I go back to the numbers, right? Hey, listen, I know how important business is to you. I know how passionate you are about having great culture. I know how important your cultural environment is within your team. This is a conversation you need to be a part of. And so just being confident to have, and hey, they may say no, and that's okay too.
Yeah, I agree with Crystal. I think the other thing too, when we think about, when people get defensive, I think it's important to remind them that this is a dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
That's all this is. And you're entitled to your opinion, and I'm entitled to my opinion, and my opinion's not going to hurt you. Your opinion's not going to hurt me. But the only way that these problems that are so deeply entrenched in the systems that run our communities, the only way that those problems are going to be solved is by us talking about it. So this isn't an attack on you. This is me asking you to contribute to the solution. Right? I'm not making you the problem. I'm asking you to contribute to the solution. And I think if we couch the conversation in those terms, what we're really asking is we're asking for people to contribute their unique skills, talents, efforts, intelligence, whatever it is, influence, to making deeper, more significant change in our community. And who wouldn't want to be a part of that, right? So I'm not trying to hurt you by having this conversation. I'm trying to help you.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to ask, our Niagara leaders, our business community, to say, hey, tell us a couple things that you might be doing, or tell us some of the benefits you see from incorporating diversity and inclusion within your organization. And, they may be deer in headlights, or they may have made an action or taken a few steps to do that. And so I think that would be an interesting kind of way to approach things. Passive aggressive, maybe, but kind of interesting. Kind of interesting.
Thank you, Julie and Crystal. I wish that this conversation can keep going on. This has just been such great dialogue and conversation. But thank you, thank you, thank you. It's truly appreciated. And to everyone who attended this session, thank you for showing up and for having this conversation as well. It's so important for you to participate and to hear these conversations and then take the calls to actions and implement them as well. So everyone here will be receiving a follow-up email with resources, some really exciting announcements, as well as some organizations that our speakers suggest supporting. So thank you for attending. Again, thank you, Julie, Crystal. We hope you all have a great night and will join us for a future Real Talk event. Take care.
Our pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.